I recently gave the Accenture interview, and guess what? I did get selected. I did get the offer and I did get selected in the recent interview as well. So in this video, I'm going to share you the exact questions that they asked me in my recent Accenture interview. But before we get started, one of our subscriber father is suffering from cerebral abscess and needs to go through brain surgery. So I request you guys to make any payments from your end to help our subscriber. I will provide his GPay number and link to donate. Please do check it out. So let's get started. So the first question that they asked me is that basically they gave me this kind of class. Even before that, they did ask me what is see all data means, and I answered this. And based on that, they asked me this question. And please do mind that these questions sequence are not as per as the mark. So I have just changed the sequence so that you get the highest quality of the content. So the one of the questions that they asked me is that, let's say what I have done is at the function level, or sorry, at the class level, I have made see all data equals to true for a class. This is a test class. And for the function level, for one of the method, I have made it as false. And for another method, I have made it as true. So in this question, they asked me that will this particular method, will it be able to see the data of Salesforce org itself? Basically, what you are doing is you are making class level as true and function level as false. So will this particular method will be able to see the records of Salesforce? And the answer to this question is that yes, it will be able to see. So when you specify see all data true to the class level itself, in that cases, all the methods within it will be able to see the records of the Salesforce itself. So it will be applicable throughout the class itself. So for this, next question that he asked me is that what if you make it class level as false and method level as true? Then in this scenario, what would be the case? So here class level is false, method level is true, and this method is false. So what would be the scenario in both of these methods? An answer to this question is that if you make class level as false, but if you make a particular method as true, only this method, only this particular method will be able to see the data of Salesforce, but this method won't be able to see it and will be using the data of the test class itself. So let's move on to the next question that says that, let's say I have a private method available in my class and we aren't able to cover it in test classes. What are the few methods you can cover that private method? So let's say basically I have a class A and there is a private method within it, and I have a test class and I want to cover this particular method. So to do that, I have to call this private method, and basically a private method cannot be called in some another class. So how do we fix it? Now to fix it, what you can do is you can just write is test visible. If you write this, automatically this private method will be visible to test class and will be able to cover this particular method itself. Let's move on to the next question that says that what are the best practices that I follow while writing the Apex code? So usually my answer is something like this: no query within for loops, no DMN in for loops, query with for loops, maps and sets, bulkified. This is very classic, right? Every person, if you ask them what are the best practices, they will answer this kind of question. But I add something extra to it. Something extra to it saying that this is my own best practice. That's what I say. I try to use custom setting and custom metadata within my code itself. With this, what user can do is user can make changes to the code without even actually touching the code itself. He does not even need to open the Apex class and do something. He can just go and configure inside the custom setting and custom metadata, just making that particular Apex code completely configurable, and even an admin can go and change it. So this is the answer to this question. Let's move on to the next question that says that I have two for loops. You can see over here, this is one of the for loop and this is the second for loop. So their question was, which is the for loop that you are going to use in this scenario? So one of the for loop says that I'm using query within the for loop, and which is the another one is outside the for loop. So how are you going to, like, which one are you going to use? So I said that I'm going to use this first for loop. The reason is because, okay, of course they did ask me like which for loop are you going to use and what is the reason behind it. So I was going to use the first for loop, and there are three specific reasons for it. First reason is that I am saving one variable. In the below for loop, I have to create one more variable here, and here I don't need to create any variable at all, and I can query and process the record at the same time itself. Second, I said that here over here what I'm basically doing is I'm querying and using the record itself at the same time itself basically, or we can say that here you don't need to do any kind of null checking. Okay, in this particular scenario here you don't need to do any kind of null checking, but in this particular scenario in the second parameter, second type of the for loops in ACC list, you have to check the size is greater than 0, and only then you go ahead and try to, I mean, you can further process the record inside the for loop itself. And the third scenario I said that is that here you are querying the records and using it immediately. On the other hand, here you're querying all the records. Okay, if you need it, if you don't need, does not matter. You're querying all the records, and then once you're querying the record, then you are processing. So it's double thing, right? You're querying the records, and after that you're again processing. Here you're querying and processing at the same time itself. So that's the reason why I went with the first for loop instead of the second for loop. Let's move on to the next question that says that complex exceptions that I've faced in the past. Now, this kind of open-ended questions, right? This is an open-ended question. You can answer anything that you want to. So, what is the complex exceptions that I have faced in the past? That's what the question they have asked. So, exceptions that I have faced, usually I tell them the exceptions that I can juggle around. For an example, I will tell them the exceptions so that they can ask the question around this same exception itself. So, few of the exception I say is that mixed DML, future to future call, right? And another one is nothing but timeout limit, right? So these are the few errors that I usually say. Using this, what happens is I always form around a scenario behind it, like in which scenario I did face this issue, so that I get more control over the interview, as it's an open-ended question. So here they did immediately ask me, where did you face this future to future call? So I said them, I had a batch class which was triggering, which was making an update, and that update was executing a trigger, and that trigger had a future method. So basically from the batch to trigger and trigger to future, and basically you are calling a batch to future indirectly, and that's the reason why I got future to future call error. So the next question is that, see in the next question itself, that how do you fix it? Like next question they asked me is that if you get this kind of error, like batch is calling, sorry, batch is calling trigger and then trigger is calling future, how do you fix this issue, right? So I have a batch which makes an update, I have a trigger which calls a future, and this method, right? And then basically of course this future might be called in some another method. So how do you fix it? So the answer to this I said is that I will check if batch dot is executing. Sorry for my keypad, but yeah, I will just check whether the batch is executing. If batch is not executing, only then go ahead and call the future, so that whenever the batch will execute, it will update the things and it will execute the trigger which will call the future. But as the batch is executing, because of this check, the future won't get called and you won't get this kind of error. So this is the scenario that I explained. Let's move on to the next question, that I'm getting CPU time limit exceed error. How do I fix it? Like why do we get it and how do I fix it? So as soon as I said, as soon as I told you, right, this is an open-ended question, and when you include this kind of things, they automatically ask question around this. So timeout limit, as I said, they immediately ask me that we're getting CPU time limit exceed error. How do we fix it? Like where do we get it and how do we fix it? So first of all, whenever my apex is taking more than 10 seconds, that's where I get this CPU time limit exceed error. Now to fix this, there are two ways. One is to optimize the code. This is one of the way, by using maps, sets, lesser number of loops, lesser number of queries, and all that stuff. And second way is that, let's say even if your code is highly optimized, still you're facing this issue. How do I fix it in that scenario? Now in that scenario, you have to move it to the batch class or async apex, okay, which has a limit of 60 seconds. So automatically you go other way around. You either optimize the code or either you change the approach itself, moving it to the asynchronous apex, which has a higher limits. Now before moving to the next question, if you are having your any of the interview in the next few days or next few weeks, you can schedule an one-to-one call with me where I will take your mock interview and will ask you the most asked usually questions so that you can be very comfortable and very confident in your next interview. Let's move on to the next question that says that our customer representative have access to accounts only which he owns. Let's say 50. Basically, there is a customer representative. He owns 50 records and he can see those 50 records. But when they see the same detail through an LWC component, they're able to see all the 100 records. Let's say there are 100 records and they're able to see all the 100 records of each others as well. He's not able to understand the reason. Can you tell the reason and help him out to resolve this error? Okay, so basically, so there is a person, let's say P, he owns 50 records. So he sees 50 records, pretty standard. But from an LWC point of view, that P is now able to see 100 records. The question is, why is he able to see 100 records? How do I fix it? Basically, see, LWC component includes of HTML, JS and Apex. Now basically this Apex class would be without sharing, and that's the reason why you are able to see everybody records within the LWC component itself. Now if you want to impose it, all you have to do is we have to use with sharing, and along with that, just for security, use with security enforced within your query so that you query only those fields that are necessary and that you have access to. So this was the question, this was the answer that I gave to this particular question. Let's move on to the next question that says that I'm querying the records in without sharing class. So I wanted that before querying the record, I want to check if the user has the read access to this particular field or object. And if yes, only then we need to able to query the field. Let's not, okay, fine. Let's say there is a X user. He has no access to read or edit a field in object A. Now I'm running it without sharing. Okay, in without sharing I'm running it. So what steps should I do in order to fix this issue? First of all, I'm going to query the records, okay, with security enforce. That's what I said. Okay, I'm not sure whether it's correct or not. Okay, so I said I will query the record with security enforce keyword. This is point number one. If possible, I'll try to make it with sharing the class. It's much more better to make it with sharing if it does not impact, but if it does impacts, that's fine. Okay, but I will try to include with sharing keywords within the class itself. This is the second thing, and I'll try to add a try catch block over here, right, inside the try catch block. So I'm going to query the records. I will have with sharing in the class. I'll query the record with security enforce keyword, and then I will try to include a try catch block. That was one of the solution that I gave. Another way I thought to say is that you can see, I don't know whether it's correct or not, but you can always re-verify and get it assured that I said that I will query the field describe, and in that I will check if field is readable or something like that, right, and then we can go and query basically. Okay, I don't know whether it's correct or not, but that's what I said. An interview did not say anything, so that's what I said. Okay, it can be wrong as well. You can always correct me in my comment section. Let's move on to the next question that says that this is basically was coding around, and I'm not going to write the code because this video is going to be very long, but simply it says that under one account I have multiple contacts, and all time I have to maintain the count of the contact on its parent account object. How should we do it? Basically it's asking for roll up summary. They did ask me for roll up summary, and basically we have to, like, for an account A, let's say there are 5 contacts, so you just have to keep the count as 5. If you have 6 contacts, then you have to keep the contact count as 6, and vice versa. So you can write the code for it, and even you can Google it if you want. If you still want like me to write the code, I will post the code. If you want to, just comment down and I will surely post the code. Let's move on to the next question that says that I have an LWC component which has button inside it, and on the click of the button another LWC component opens. Now I want to pass the data from this first LWC component to another. How shall I do it? Okay, so basically there's a page, and inside that page there is a button. That is again an LWC button. Okay, now when you click on this button, what happens is LWC component opens. What basically they want is that from this button, when I click on this particular button, I want to pass the ID from here, from this LWC to let's call it LWC1 and this called as LWC2. Okay, I want to pass the ID from LWC1 to LWC2. Now many of you guys might be thinking, why don't we use what we call LMS? These are two different components, they're not related to each other, so let's go and use LMS. You might be wrong guys, because LMS works when you are within the same component itself. Like for an example, the page, you're not redirecting someone, you're not navigating anywhere else. If you're not navigating somewhere else, then in that case the LMS works very fine. If you're on the same page itself and if you want data from one component to another component, LMS works fabulously. But in this scenario, LMS does not works. Even this is not a parent child relationship, you won't be able to pass the data. Even this is not child parent relationship, you won't be able to pass the data. So question is, how will you able to do it? First of all, to navigate from one LWC component to another, you have to use a navigate function. Okay, there is a navigate function. You can move it, you can specify the LWC component and all that stuff inside this. And inside, while navigating itself, what you can do is basically when you navigate from one LWC to another LWC, your URL will become something like this. It will become very hazy. Okay, it starts from EY and something like that. Okay, it starts very haphazard. So basically, what you have to do is you have to take this URL, okay, and there is something called as B to A and A to B. I am not going to explain you, but B to A you can do it. Okay, you can pass the URL itself, and using this URL you can get the record ID. You can capture the record ID over here. Okay, or even you can pass the whole URL itself. So while navigating, you can along with navigation you can also pass the data itself. Now once you go to the LWC2 component, from that particular navigation what you have received, what you have to do is you have to get the URL and convert it to B to A. I don't remember B to A or A to B. Something is there where you can encode or decode the to get the data. Okay, I will show it in some other video how to do it, but basically this is how you do it. And then from the decoded URL you have to get your record ID and you have to proceed further. Okay, so this is quite interesting thing. I will show you definitely. I've done it recently, so I will definitely show you how to do it. Okay, let's move on to the last question that we have is that in account I have three industry: agriculture, biotechnology and finance. So write an LWC component to show all these data in the separate section. Again, I'm not going to code it much, but in very simple terms, there is an Apex class, there is JS, and there is HTML. Okay, in Apex I'm going to query the records with industry as specified. Okay, once I receive it within JS, okay, let's say in wire, whatever data I'm going to use, I'm going to for each over it. Okay, element, and here I'm going to check if data, sorry, element dot type, or let's say industry, equals to let's say agriculture. I'm just doing it for agriculture right now. You can create three different lists. One would be for agriculture, let's say I'm going to call it as agri, and another is for bio. I'm not populating bio right now, but I'm populating agri. So just go ahead, put it within the agri dot push element dot name, and similarly you will do it with bio, and similarly you will do it with finance and all that stuff. And once you come to HTML, you can for each over here and create an accordion and then show the data. You have to do three for each loops, one for agriculture, one for biotechnology, and one for finance, and show the data one by one. That's what I said. If you have a better scenario, have a better way to solve this problem, always, you're always welcome. Please do comment down, and if you have something, please, I will also learn something new. So this was all that I have to explain in this series or in this video. If you found this video helpful, I request you to please like this video and subscribe to my channel.